We are here to bring a new type of news show.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Bringing news just for you. It's Thursday, July 4th here in Seoul. I'm Song Yujin and you're watching News Generation. Today we're joined by Im Sang-yeop.
Happy Thursday.
Happy Thursday. And we have Yoon Se-young back with us.
Yay, great to be back.
Long time no see. Now, both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. As usual, we're going to start with our news feed, which covers different hashtags and news items that have been trending online over the past 24 hours. China's largest online shopping platform, Alibaba.com, announced on Wednesday that it will launch a dedicated website for Korean companies in the second half of this year, driven by increasing overseas demand for Korean products. While Korean products have been available on the platform, there hasn't been a site exclusively showcasing Korean sellers until now. Korea is the first Asian country to have its own dedicated website on Alibaba.com. Now moving on, Google's annual environmental report reveals a 48% increase in its greenhouse gas emissions since 2019. The tech giant attributes this rise to higher energy consumption in data centers that are needed to operate artificial intelligence systems and other supply chain emissions driven by advancements in and demand for AI. Now, similarly, Microsoft reported in May that its total carbon emissions have jumped nearly 30% since 2020, mainly due to the construction of new data centers as well. Finally, an Air Europa flight from Madrid to Uruguay experienced severe turbulence on Monday, injuring 30 passengers and forcing an emergency landing in Brazil. The Boeing 787-9 Dreamliner, carrying more than 320 passengers, hit strong turbulence which caused a sudden 400-meter drop, catching many unbelted passengers off guard. Witnesses say people were thrown from their seats, hitting the ceiling, which resulted in injuries. Those affected received immediate medical care in Brazil. Now, this incident comes amid recent scrutiny of Boeing safety practices, although there is exactly no evidence linking the turbulence-related injuries to any manufacturing issues. And Sang-yeop, this is not the first time that we've seen extreme turbulence being reported in the news and many people being affected by it, right?
Yes, so I think we've already seen many turbulence cases these days, and I think these situations are getting more frequent as time goes on. So the Singapore airline recently experienced turbulence a few months ago, and there was also a case where the Iran's president's helicopter crashed because of the turbulence. In fact, scientists point out that global warming is exacerbating this because as the air hits up, air particles tend to create turbulence within the stratosphere. So in light of this, airlines will have to reinforce their aircrafts to stand against strong turbulence, which will only get worse as time goes on.
Right. And as passengers, I think that it's really important for us to also enforce safety measures and think about what kind of things we should be mindful of when we are boarding on an airplane. So, Se-young, do you have any safety advice or tips that you'd like to give for watching our show?
Yes, just remember the most basic and important rule. Keep your seatbelts fastened at all times.
Right.
Passengers should always buckle up during flight whenever possible. And experts say that airplanes are designed to withstand the turbulence. So properly wearing your seatbelts can prevent injuries caused by this turbulence, including this unexpected clear air turbulence. So try to remember fasten your seatbelts all times.
Right, and as especially it's almost vacation season in many parts of the world, if you're planning to board a plane and take an overseas trip, remember to buckle up your seatbelts. And that was our news feed for this Thursday. So we're now going to move on to our main discussion of the day. Today we will talk about a demographic issue impacting especially millennials and Gen Z here in Korea. So take a look at the screen to find out more. Korea is experiencing a growing gender imbalance among its unmarried population. According to the Korea Institute for Health and Social Affairs, as of 2021, there were 19.6% more unmarried men than women, with some regions seeing this imbalance exceed 30%. Where does this demographic disparity come from, and what kind of consequences could it have? Right, so as you've just seen the VCR, today we're going to talk about this growing gender imbalance that we're witnessing among the younger generation here in Korea. So starting off, Sang-hyuk, I want to ask you, how serious is the gender imbalance issue among our generation? Do you have any relevant data or more stats on this?
Well, first of all, I think the preferences over boys than girls in the 70s were actually the culprit for this gender imbalance in the 21st century. So if we look at the recent data, we can actually see that this is leading to more men failing to get married moving forward. So according to the recent study, there are 19.6% more unmarried men than unmarried women as of 2021. Now, this number indicates that no matter how much the man is willing to get married, there will be more portion of men who will fail to find the right partner.
Right.
In fact, almost half of men born in 1985 who are about to enter their 40s will not be able to get married. And 7 out of 10 men born in 1990, that's a lot actually,
Right,
who are
it
in
is.
their mid-30s right now, will have a small chance of finding the right partner.
I think all the bachelors who are seeing our show right now here in Korea might be a bit concerned after
Including
looking.
me.
Including you. Well, you don't have to worry.
Okay.
Well, anyway, going back to what we're discussing today, Taeyong, I heard that this growing gender imbalance among the younger generation here in Korea has even caught the attention of overseas scholars, right?
That's right. Recently, a professor in the United States published a paper that includes the same analysis that Sang-hyuk just mentioned. Dudley Poston, a professor of sociology at Texas A&M University, even used the expression "the time bomb of unmarried men in Korea is about to explode" to describe the situation. And he analyzed that up to 800,000 men who were born in Korea after the 1980s are at risk of not finding marriage partner. So, unfortunately in Korea, a preference for sons has caused a gender imbalance for the past 30 years due to Confucian culture.
Right.
And while it is common for more boys than girls to be born in many different countries as well, this issue is particularly severe in Korea. And this is, of course, grim news for Korean men who are reaching marriageable age. And the competition among men who want to get married is expected to be even more intense. And what's more concerning is that the long-term social problem resulting from this gender imbalance is expected to remain in Korea for decades.
Right. So to talk about more about the severity and the long-term consequences of the gender imbalance that we're witnessing, we're now going to invite an expert into our discussion to find out really what has triggered this issue among unmarried Koreans and why we should pay attention to it. We're back. Today we're joined by Baek Ji-sun, a researcher in social studies at the University of St. Andrews. Welcome back, Ji-sun, to the show.
Nice to see you again.
Nice
Hi.
to see you again. Right, so our first question for you today is, what do you think triggered Korea's gender imbalance among the unmarried population?
So the short answer would be because of sex-selective abortion and patriarchal culture where men are considered more valuable. Many couples in the 80s and 90s chose abortion if they found out they were expecting a girl. The birth sex ratio, which indicates how many boys are born per 100 girls, is supposed to be between 104 and 107. However, in Korea between the 80s and 90s, this sex ratio was over 110 and even 115, which is very unnatural. And these babies who are born in 80s and 90s are the people who are in a marriage market right now. So the combination of son preference culture and advanced technology made it possible to choose to abort solely based on the sex of the baby.
So it seems that the Korea's traditional preference for boys over girls due to the Confucian culture is leading to this gender imbalance. Now moving on to the next question, then do you think this kind of preference for boys still exists today?
So actually, a few months ago, the Korean Constitutional Court removed a law restricting the disclosure of a baby's sex before birth. It was because they believed that the son preference culture is no longer significant, which might be true. Because, these days we can see many parents showing a preference for daughters over sons. I think even my mom is like that. But however, if we consider the underlying reason, it remains highly gendered. They favor daughters because women are perceived as more caring and emotionally warm than men. So long story short, even though it's true that more parents now prefer daughters over sons, the underlying reasons are complex and not really positive.
Jason, I totally agree with you. And what kind of impact could this gender imbalance have on our society?
I think that's a very important question. First of all, the negative impact actually started as soon as the mothers had sex-selective abortions. Because, physically and psychologically, the abortion might have affected the mothers. And bear in mind that abortion was illegal at the time, so there was no guarantee that the method was even safe. Additionally, there has been a huge stigma against women who have had abortions, which makes the problem even worse. Alongside that, I believe that there will be, and already is, an impact of the skewed sex ratio in the marriage market. This can create challenges such as increased competition for marriage partners and skewed demographic patterns. And these might lead to even lower fertility rate in Korea.
I see. Some very great insights as always. All right, Jisun, thank you so much for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. Right, so we've just heard from our interviewees. So let's come back here in the studio. I want to ask you guys, do you guys also feel this imbalance between men and women when you look around your peers? Starting with you, Sang-yeon?
Well, I think the marriage itself is getting less of a pleasure for the youth these days. If I think about the friends around me, the marriage age for both men and women has gone up compared to the past.
Right.
Because if I think about my parents, they married in their mid-20s, whereas nowadays the youth tend to get married in their 30s. And of course, I see that more women are getting married than men these days. So as a solo male in my 30s, I do feel intimidated that I may end up living alone with my cats
You may have to compete.
in the later years. Yeah, I may have to compete. But I guess I have to face the reality because living alone and would not be that bad after all. If we think about Japan, where there are many single-person households, there are good infrastructures for guys like me, restaurants where you can have a meal for one person. And also there are special medical emergency systems for the elderly living alone.
I think that just seeing those infrastructures, the number of them increasing shows that how we are actually feeling this gender imbalance, not only here in Korea, but in other parts of the world. Now to you, Seong, I want to also toss you this question. I think that you'll be able to bring a different perspective because as we know, you're married, you have kids as well. So.
Right. I'm feeling grateful that I'm married because I don't
I'm
have to.
envious.
Because at least I don't have to worry about these problems. Though, although marriage is a personal choice, of course, but in my everyday life and among the people I meet, I don't think I've ever felt a significant difference in the ratio of single men to single women.
I also feel that I haven't really felt that difference, gender imbalance between males and females, but I think that one of the big reasons why is because we all live in capital Seoul, and the data that we first mentioned in our VCR showed that this gender imbalance is really big in outer capital regions, non-capital regions, so the situation might be a bit different from here. Now going back to our interviewee, she mentioned that one of the major reasons behind this imbalance has been Korea's longtime preference for boys. And so do you think that this preference for boys still exists in our society, because that's one of the major reasons behind this growing gender imbalance.
No, I don't think there are any more preferences for boys over girls these days. Actually, many people prefer daughters more these days. My parents have only 2 sons, and there were times that they used to say they wanted another baby, hoping for a girl, but they couldn't because they were afraid that they might end up having 3 consecutive sons. Yes, which could be really difficult to raise all the 3 boys.
Right. So based on Sang-hyuk's answers, the atmosphere might be changing. We are seeing a more preference for daughters than boys when compared to the past. We might see this gender imbalance being improved moving on. But Taeyong, do you also feel that this preference has kind of gone down in the past?
Yes. And also in my age, I was born in 1989, a long time ago, and my parents had 2 daughters, no son, me and my younger sister. But they've always been proud of us, and I don't think I felt discriminated against for being a daughter. So I think it totally depends on family culture and value.
Right.
And I have both son and daughter. My first one is a boy, and second one is a girl. And although we love our first child very much, but one of the reasons why we decided to have a second child and become a patriot was because we really wanted a girl. So we decided to give it a shot.
And it worked.
Yeah, it worked. Yay. And I think a lot of parents these days decided to have a second child for the same reason. So I believe the preference for sons seems like a thing of the past these days. And it seems many parents today prefer daughters over sons. And although we love our boys too. Boys are adorable too, but I think that's the trend. Yes.
Right, I can definitely feel that the trend is changing. And one of the main reasons why we brought up this topic today is because this disproportionate ratio of males to females within a population is especially becoming a bigger concern, as it's seen as a big obstacle for people to find a significant other and tie the knot, which could further exacerbate Korea's shrinking and aging population, which we've talked about several times here on NewsGen as well. So I want to ask you, Sang-hyuk, are you also worried about this issue?
Well, I think the imbalance of men and women did contribute to this low fertility rate, but I think there are just more than that. For example, the rising house price and child rearing costs are factors that refrain youth from having children. And also many women are afraid of career break after giving birth. And actually, not many companies these days have like friendly office culture, which makes women think less about getting married in the first place. And most of all, there are just so many things that are fun other than marriage in modern day society.
I miss those days.
Yeah. So it was a conventional norm to get married and have children back in the 80s and 90s. But today, there's a widespread belief that marriage is not a must in one's life, although I expect those who raise children, although they're working mothers.
Right. So this changing perception towards marriage among our generation, and also the more advancement and improvement in infrastructure that we need when growing a child might be some of the other reasons why younger generation is becoming a bit more hesitant to getting married. Now, Taeyong, as a mother and as a married individual, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, I completely agree. If I had to define what Sang-hyuk just explained in one word, it would be Enpo generation, referring to the generation who has given up numerous things, including dating and marriage. And I think bigger problem is related to this Enpo generation phenomenon. And additionally, I see a lot of singles around me who say that the more they spend time alone due to the reasons mentioned above, the less confident they feel about living with someone else.
Because you're so used to living by yourself. Right. That may be another reason behind Korea's dropping marriage rate as well as birth rate. Now, we've mostly talked about today the situation here in Korea. So we also asked our viewers about the male to female ratio in their countries and whether they think this balance is important. And here's what 3 of them had to say. So if we look at the comments, Benny says, for me, when I check for the male to female sex ratio at birth, our data for the Philippines remains at 1. And if some countries have some imbalance, here in the Philippines, it remains in the right balance. Leon says Singapore does not have a significant imbalance of male to female sex ratio at birth. Having balanced SRB can contribute to greater gender equality, so the government continues to monitor its SRB and may adjust policies if necessary. Brodo says in in India, there is a skewed male-to-female sex ratio at birth due to cultural preferences for sons, leading to sex-selective abortions. This creates demographic imbalance, perpetuates gender disparities, impacts the economy, and harms women's social and psychological well-being. So based on the comments, we can see that the situation is kind of different depending on the country. Some countries have a good gender balance, while some countries are still struggling with gender imbalance, just like Korea. So for those countries who are still seeing a gender imbalance, ending off, what kind of measures do you think should be implemented to kind of strike this balance between males and females?
Well, first of all, if you just look at the Korean society, I think raising fertility rate is more urgent rather than balancing the gender because we cannot see daughters, let alone sons, on the streets these days. People just don't give birth anymore easily. And we'll have to flip the downside that I've mentioned earlier to recover this low fertility rate. Our society should establish more favorable environment to raise children, and companies should create an environment where moms can freely use parental leave.
Right, because we can't really change the number of males and females that we already have now, but we can do something about the dropping fertility rate if we implement or come up with more infrastructure that helps child rearing. Now, Seong, what kind of suggestions do you have?
Right, just like mentioned by you guys, continuous attention and efforts are needed in various aspects, such as improving awareness of gender equality and implementing policies that will actually boost the nation's birth rate and achieving balanced regional development and supporting international marriages as well.
And when I listened to your answer, I kind of thought of that ministry that the Korean government is coming up. It's actually launching to take care of the plummeting birth rate and also to kind of encourage more people to start a family. So I hope that we could see more much needed changes, not only here in Korea, but around the world. And until then, NewsGen is here every day from 9:30 to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you more topics young people are talking about. Special thanks today to Im
My
Sang-yeon
pleasure, as always.
and Yoon Se-young.
Thank you.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are News Generation.